Okay? Okay. All right. Let's get Russ Baker on the line. Russ Baker, of course, the guy behind WhoWhatWhy.com. WhoWhatWhy.com. And actually, they do original investigations, and actually, there's a new one up today.
Hello.
Hey, Russ Baker. It's Nicole Sandler calling.
Hey, Nicole Sandler.
How are you?
Wonderful.
Good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too.
I spent the morning, actually the first half hour of the show today, basically lauding President Obama. Not something I do very often, but for his a step in the right direction. Let's put it that way. Yesterday, in terms of his 4 recess appointments. Let's hope this is just a harbinger of things to come. Mm-hmm. Right? So he did something good there. I'm trying to turn over a new leaf in the new year, which is to sort of, to quote Monty Python, look on the bright side of life, to try to, count my blessings and look at good things and approach things in a sort of an optimistic way rather than, the pessimistic way I tend to look at things recently. But that might not be possible in talking about the piece you published at WhoWhatWhy.com yesterday entitled Obama, Yes, I'm in a Can.
Right. Again, I also try to, I'm a journalist, and I like to think that I put aside whatever activist inclinations I have and really look at these things in terms of the way that I think most people would look at things if you stripped everything of labels. And I agree with you that those recess appointments, by the way, those came through after we had posted this article, but doesn't disprove the thrust of it, which is that he really doesn't quite get it, and he doesn't do enough in a substantive way of what the mass of the public seems to want him to do, which is to take care of their interests.
Well, I agree with you. So what can we do? I mean, let's talk about the things that, as progressives, as those, I would think, and I'm assuming I'm bunching you in here, people who would rather see him win a second term than see President Romney, Santorum, Gingrich, Paul, or even Huntsman, right? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing, given those choices, you'd rather see a second term of Obama?
Let me put it this way. Okay. As you know, as journalists, and this is sort of boring, we're very, very careful to be neutral or even pretend to be neutral. None of us actually are, but we do. I mean, one thing about our craft is that we want to look at everybody not as if they're our friend, but just as if they're just a figure. What are they doing? And so here's what we do with this article on WhoWhatWhy.com. We make the point that he really is kind of trying to please everybody, and so the activities that you mentioned from yesterday, which, by the way, were obviously carefully choreographed and designed to steal the thunder from the GOP right after Iowa. So that's what that was, and it does at least superficially look like a move in the public interest direction, particularly with things like consumer protection and so forth. The problem is, as we point out in this article on Who, What, Why, his best friend now is the head of the UBS Bank, which, defrauded the American taxpayers of vast amounts of money, that he does not quite get it, that he's doing these appointments, which seem to be in the public interest, and yet he doesn't see that he cannot give this man the kind of access that he's giving him.
No, I hear what you're saying, and you are pointing out a lot of the things that we need to be concerned about. You say that, the president of UBS Bank, and it's hard to say that this is, one of the worst when they're all just horrible. They're
all the worst.
They're all the worst.
Maybe the worst of the worst.
Really? Why is it the worst of the worst?
Well, because just scroll down in the story. I mean, let me see. Is it in this? No, there's a previous piece.
Right. You did a UBS banker
there's a
piece.
link there where you click on Noted, and that takes you to the previous piece. And here's what this bank did. Okay, they went to some of the wealthiest Americans, and they said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, let us help you cheat the American government and the U.S. taxpayer. Let us help you not pay your taxes. Now, the rest of us, we have no choice. Either there's withholding or whatever, yes, or independent contractors also have got to pay. We have no way to hide our income. And then, we have a list here of the things that UBS actually did, giving clients code names, giving them shredders, untraceable phones. I mean, this is a crime, okay? And UBS basically stole billions and billions and billions of dollars from the U.S., perhaps as much as $100 billion. They settled for
$780 million. Right. So you say UBS paid $780 million to avoid prosecution. Do the math. $780 million payment on a $100 billion crime. That's nothing.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't steal a dollar and give back a penny on it? And then not only do they do this, but then Obama chooses the man who runs this bank, to be his best friend. He takes him on vacation. Right. He golfs with him. He brings him into the White House, into his circle of economic advisors. The fact that Who, What, Why is the only place, literally, as far as I know, in the country that regularly writes about his relationship with this man. The New York Times mentions the man in passing in an article about how few friends Obama has, and doesn't find this interesting that this guy is spending so much of his time with the president.
I got to tell you, that's disturbing. We're speaking with Russ Baker. The website is whowhatwhy.com. And, let's take a little break here and talk about who, what, why. Somebody in the chat room just asked, and they must not be paying very close attention, where is the progressive media? Let's talk more. Where is the independent media? Where is a media that is not bought and paid for by their corporate owners? Well, this is one great example of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what the problem is. We have increasingly identified, one of the things we're trying to do, because we're a nonprofit, and so we can only thrive and survive and grow if members of the public and sort of nonprofit foundations say, we like what these people are doing, and grow us. And so we have to differentiate our mission and say, how are we different? What do we bring to the table that others are not doing? And here's really where it comes down to. Most of the media out there can be divided into two camps. There is the old model, the corporate-owned mainstream media, New York Times and so on, which have that Jekyll and Hyde act where they're trying to say, we're neutral, we don't take any sides, and we're just kind of representing what all the different players are saying, and then they've got an editorial page where they express their opinions. And then the other side of it is websites that are overtly partisan, which is fine too. But they're not they're not going to run any stories about Obama if they like him.
Right.
And so our third way is to say, our only customer is the public. All we do is we try to figure out what is in the general public interest. And people could say, well, there are different sides, but a lot of that battle, Nicole, you get it. You're one of the smartest people in radio, and that's why I love to be on your show. You get this. Even that, left-right dichotomy is a little bit exaggerated, because if you actually talk to people in any of these movements, whether it's Occupy or Tea Party or whatever, when you really talk about their personal concerns, I mean, they all think that they're for fairness. They all think they're for equity and transparency. They all think that they want themselves and their neighbors to be safe and to live a life by some pre-established rules. And so most of us have a lot in common, actually. We want a fair deal and a fair playing field, and we want to know that if we pay taxes, everybody has to pay taxes. So that's where we come down, and we're looking at these stories, and we're looking at a guy like Obama, and we're not saying we like him, we don't like him, we want him to win, we want him to lose. What we're saying is, if he wants to win, and if he wants to continue being president, he's got to make some tough choices. And I think the crux of the thing is that it really is dangerous, and I mean that literally. It really is dangerous for any individual to become president and to take on these powerful forces. You can say whatever you want, but as you know in my book, Family of Secrets, I write about what happened to John F. Kennedy, what happened to Jimmy Carter, what happened to Richard Nixon. A lot of these people, Dwight Eisenhower was struggling with this, Truman. They were all struggling with the, this nomenclature, this powerful a group of interest, and it's not conspiracy theory. We know who these people are. These are bankers. These are a career high-level military people. These are people who created and dominated these secret intelligence agencies. They have a very different worldview than we do, and they don't like the idea of some yes we can guy getting in there and really yes we canning. And I think Obama knows that, and he's very, very wary and very cautious of not antagonizing them too much. The problem is once you get in there, you cannot do that half-baked thing. You have to just go for it.
Russ Baker is with us, and Russ, you did mention Family of Secrets, which I was about to bring up. Russ wrote the book Family of Secrets, and it really is about the Bush family in depth and things that you know that there's some stuff, there's some like nefarious background in the Bush family, but this really it draws back the curtain on them, and it's a must-read book. So in context,
Nicole, by the way, the reason that understanding the Bushes is so important right now is they really represent this group. It's not an organized group, but let's say the 1% of the 1%. The Bush family represents the triumph of that, and then when Obama comes in, it's a kind of a little bit of a retrenchment. Other people and other interests get in and start stating their case, and there's a struggle for power going on. That is really what is happening, and it's not on the surface. It's beneath the surface. But Obama once said this. You remember, Nicole, when he said, make me do the right thing?
Oh, yes. I play it all the time.
Well, he meant that. He meant, look, if I have, if people are in the streets, if people are active and they're demanding it, I can go to these people who really are rather threatening to me and say, listen, what do you want me to do? There's nothing I can do. It's just like the military in Egypt. I've got to do something. And it basically gives him some protection to move forward in that direction.
I hear you. I think so many of us, many of us did not have the rose-colored glasses on when we got Obama, but we looked at him as, not as bad as what we just suffered through 8 years of, and perhaps a refreshing change. But the question I was going to ask you, since you did all that research into the Bush family, is and then last night, just as an aside, David, my fiance, and I were watching a Vanguard show that comes on current after Olbermann, and it was on the Occupy movement. And a reporter was entrenched. He lived in Zuccotti Park along with the protesters, and then he went with a guy from Tennessee home and saw the blighted neighborhood and all the factories that shut down. I mean, they just went through, and it was depressing. It was stunning. And David and I looked at each other, and it's like that is a direct result of NAFTA. So although we might have had years of prosperity under Bill Clinton, his policies really, really laid the groundwork for the horrible mess we're in now. When was the last time we had a president that wasn't corrupt in some way, that didn't do something just that set the country on an even worse course?
My research for Family of Secrets convinced me, and this surprised me. I know some people may have already thought this, and some people certainly didn't, that it was John F. Kennedy, and that he came in. And he kind of wasn't sure what he was going to do, and he was trying to, like Obama, like most of them, he was trying to satisfy a lot of different parties, and he surrounded him with all of these, Cold War hawks and bankers and skull and bones people and all of this. He himself, his inclinations were a little bit in another direction, but he really kind of decided who he was while he was president, and he became increasingly bold. I write about that, by the way, in Family of Secrets. I have 4 chapters on JFK because it sets the stage. I really am increasingly convinced that the assassination of John F. Kennedy was a kind of the closing of that door. And then if you look at the subsequent presidents, Nixon, amazingly, although a very, very fraught, complicated, and in some ways evil individual, tried to also do a number of significant reforms, did some. He ended up under unpleasant circumstances, and I think the fact that the figures involved in the Watergate burglary were some of the same ones who were involved with the Bay of Pigs and going after Kennedy was no coincidence. Jimmy Carter, really an honorable man. I mean, he did do a lot of the kind of things you're talking about, Clintonian things that the bankers wanted. But on a lot of fronts, he really tried, for example, to reform the CIA to stop it from the anti-democratic activities all over the world. But, they kept him to one term. They went after him. I think the Burt Lance scandal was calculated to try to bring him down. So was the situation with the Iranian hostages. These are very complicated behind-the-scenes things that go on. And so I think that each of these presidents tries in their own way to do it, but because we don't really have a handle on the actual machinations of power centers in this country, because the media never talks about this thing, and I'm including, by the way, the progressive media. They simply won't talk about the kind of things you and I are discussing right now, which is how is it that 1% of 1% can dominate everything all the time in a purported democracy?
Good question, and you're right in that. I'm also, while I'm talking to you, I'm also reading the chat room, and they're all saying that the so-called progressive media won't even go there. They won't discuss this stuff. They won't talk about it. That's why I think it is so important. Websites like yours, and I hate to say, shows like mine. Are important that we are discussing this stuff. You have MSNBC, which might even be worse than Fox in some ways because they hold themselves out there as a progressive outlet. When all you need to do is look at their owners and see, and then look at the things that they don't report on.
Well, that's right, Nicole, and I think what distinguishes you and the very few people who we could loosely lump with you is that you are open-minded and you are trying to figure out what's going on. I think one of the problems, and I generally would say that a lot of those MSNBC shows are hosted by good people who are trying to do what they can, but the reality is that those corporations will only allow them to present everything as this constant slugfest. It's all, it's politics is professional wrestling. It's the fight of the day. They feed, another article on our website, whowhatwhy.com, is this one about the Iowa caucuses, and we wrote it, a week before the caucuses, and we were saying this is just a distraction, folks. This is what they're trying to do is to kind of fill up all of your bandwidth so you can't see what's really going on. And the truth of the matter is it doesn't matter who wins in Iowa. It probably doesn't even matter who wins in the election, and that's really what we ought to be talking about. But those programs that you're describing, Nicole, are very much oriented towards this, kind of battle between, one group of people in the streets versus another group of people in the streets. When what they really ought to be talking about is the people who pay their $1 million checks. That is really what dominates this country.
Boy, I hear ya. Now, again, Russ Baker is with us from the website whowhatwhy.com. And as you mentioned, you are nonprofit. You work solely with reader support and grants?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you've got another piece up. You didn't write it. Spencer Mandel did. That was just published today. The Cradle of Conflagration, the end and beginning of the war for Iraq. And basically, if I read this correctly, you're saying that, our pullout in Iraq is by no means the end of the war. In fact, we saw a story that broke today. I think 72 people were killed in the latest bomb blast there. It almost seems like they waited for us to leave to ratchet things up. However, we didn't really leave, did we?
Well, no, because there's a huge number of contractors in there, and we're going to see them being killed. But they're basically surrogates. In all of these places, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, the media deficiencies become so apparent because they treat these things as finite. And they're not finite. They're part of, and this is what Spencer's article I think highlights, that these are ongoing situations into which we insert ourselves constantly, sometimes visibly, sometimes through these surrogates. But these are ongoing things, and if you don't cover them, over the long haul. And if you don't constantly explain to people why these places matter, you get a very, very warped sense of what's going on. I think that the media really does a disservice, and maybe it's even that their own reporters are so under pressure, of deadlines to construct kind of artificial events, artificial, the pullout. So the pullout becomes a big event, and it takes on more significance than it actually deserves. The real issue in places like Iraq and Afghanistan is that all countries operate in self-interest, and so we in the United States, when we go into these places, we do not go in for nation building, and we do not go in to create democracy, and we do not go in to create regional stability. We go in for self-interest. Self-interest usually comes down to things that you and I can touch and feel. Like I'm sitting here right now, not far from a gas fire. I would be cold otherwise because I'm in a cold place in the mountains, and somebody has to supply that gas. That's why we're in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm not saying that we don't need the gas, but we ought to at least be honest about these things and have a discussion about a world of limited resources and how all of us, not just us comfortable Americans, but uncomfortable Americans who don't have any heat and people all over the world who have nothing, how are we all going to get along and find some way to be able to survive in a sharing kind of a world?
Boy, I hear you, and especially when you look at it, you talk about the people who are going to be cold this winter, especially right now, and once again, the second year in a row, our government cuts the LIHEAP budget, the low-income heating assistance, while they refuse to raise taxes on the people who wouldn't miss a couple extra bucks out of their, vast fortunes, if we took it.
Well, that's right. And you know something? I mean, again, you were talking about Obama. If he wants to be reelected and he wants to get any kind of a popular mandate behind him, he should have somebody like Nicole Sandler talking to him on a daily basis and say, hey, Nicole, that's a really good idea. Let's put up, in my speeches, let's put up ads and let's just say, hey, one very wealthy American could do without a few of their yacht trips or whatever, and this would supply, heating oil to X number of people who otherwise would have none. These are the kind of basic math that we need to be doing.
I hear you. So what happens next? Obviously, it's a tough re-election or election season. I think it's a case of least evil. I mean, it's like who is the least bad?
Yeah, it does certainly look like it would end up being Obama versus Romney, and this is another subject that interests me. On whowhatwhy.com, we posted a piece about the New York Times and how soft they've been generally on Romney, running kind of endearing pieces of, like one of them said, he's very rich, but on the other hand, he's cheap, and the implication was, don't be too hard on him because he's part of this 1% of 1%, because he doesn't actually live that ostentatiously. But then the question becomes, well, then what are his values? In other words, why does he devote his life to amassing huge amounts of money, taking over companies and laying people off if it's not for his own benefit? For whose benefit is that? And,
well, exactly. And we can further ask, why won't he release his tax returns? I mean, the other question is, he's been asked, well, when you become president, will you do it like other presidents do? Well, we'll talk about that then. It's a little too early to get into that. Well, you know what? No, it isn't.
Right.
What's he hiding?
And so the point that we're making with this article is that places like the Times are going so easy on him for a very simple reason, because they don't think of him as that bad. I think they prefer Obama, but they'd rather have an Obama-Romney matchup because they realize that on the crux issues, it's going to be the same. I mean, the war policies are going to continue the same way. The resource policies, the policies toward the rich are not going to be notably different. I think they see Romney as much more moderate than a George W. Bush, and so it becomes kind of like a lot of these matchups: Humphrey Nixon, Obama McCain, Clinton Dole. They're two guys who are sort of peas in a pod, and this is basically the establishment keeping us out of the mix and preventing us. I mean, it would probably be much healthier in this country if we had radical extremes. You know, I don't know if people like Santorum and stuff would really do the crazy things they say, but it certainly would be interesting to, you know, have a Santorum followed by a Dennis Kucinich or a Ron Paul or something, and see what would actually happen.
Oh, that would be interesting, to say the least. Excuse me, Russ Baker, whowhatwhy.com. And thanks for coming on this morning. Sorry about yesterday. Things got a little messed up, but I hope you'll come on more regularly this year.
I will do it anytime. Thank
Terrific.
you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.